The first thing the spirit ever learned about humans was the sound they made exactly 7 seconds before death. Not a scream, not a prayer. A pause, a tiny fracture in the rhythm of living, as though the world itself inhaled before erasing someone's name. For centuries, the spirit wandered through forgotten villages, crowded cities, frozen forests, and silent battlefields. It never hunted. It never killed. Death belonged to something older, something even the spirit feared. Its only gift and its only curse was certainty. The moment it looked into a person's eyes, it saw the final scene of that life with impossible clarity. Some would drown beneath black waves while reaching for a child who survived. Some would grow old, smiling peacefully as sunlight crossed their bedroom window. Others would vanish in fire, betrayal, illness, accidents, or violence that had not yet happened. Every ending already existed. Every life carried its last page. The spirit couldn't change any of them. It had tried thousands of times. Every warning became another thread, leading people exactly where fate intended them to be. A merchant escaped a collapsing bridge after hearing the spirit's whisper, only to die minutes later beneath his own horse. A queen canceled a voyage after seeing terror in the spirit's hollow eyes. That night, the palace roof collapsed while she slept. A soldier deserted the battlefield and celebrated surviving the war. He died opening the door to his own home. The future resisted change with terrifying precision. Eventually, the spirit stopped speaking. Watching became easier than hoping. Hope was cruel. Certainty was quieter. Centuries passed. Civilizations rose and vanished. Children became legends. Legends became dust. Yet the spirit remained, drifting where shadows gathered, unseen by almost everyone. Almost. There were always a few. Infants sometimes stared directly at it before learning language. Animals refused to enter rooms where it waited. The dying occasionally smiled at it, as if recognizing an old companion they had forgotten. But no one truly understood what it was, until the night the names disappeared. It began inside a mountain village, hidden beneath endless pine forests. Snow had covered every rooftop, muting the world beneath a blanket of white silence. The village held only 73 people. The spirit knew every face. It knew which child would someday become a doctor, which hunter would freeze during his final winter, which grandmother would die laughing beside her family. Every destiny rested quietly inside its memory. Then, without warning, one vanished. Not the person, the ending. The spirit looked into the eyes of a young baker carrying fresh bread across the square. Nothing, no final image, no last breath, only darkness. Impossible. The spirit stepped closer. Still nothing. The baker smiled politely, unaware that centuries of certainty had just shattered. For the first time since the world was young, the future refused to answer. Before the spirit could understand, another ending disappeared, then another. Within minutes, every villager's death had become invisible. Every life had become an unreadable page. Panic, an emotion the spirit believed it had forgotten, spread through its ancient existence. Something had changed, something impossible. That night, the spirit searched every road, every house, every sleeping face. Nothing, no endings, only silence. Except one child. At the edge of the village stood a weathered cabin surrounded by ancient cedar trees. Inside lived a boy no older than 10. His name was Elias. He had no parents. The villagers believed illness had taken them years ago. Elias rarely spoke. He spent hours carving strange symbols into pieces of wood that no adult recognized. Children avoided him. Adults pitied him. The spirit expected another blank future. Instead, it saw death, crystal clear, a moonless night, an abandoned stone well deep inside the forest, rain falling like silver needles. The boy standing alone, a pale hand emerging from the darkness beneath the water. Then, nothing. The vision ended there. Not because Elias survived, because something interrupted the future itself. The spirit stared in disbelief. Every soul in the village had become unreadable, except one. Why? It watched the boy through the window. Elias suddenly stopped carving. Slowly, he raised his head. His gray eyes locked directly onto the spirit. Not through it. At it. No. Human had looked at the spirit like that in hundreds of years. The boy smiled, not with happiness, with recognition. "I've been waiting." The words were barely louder than the crackling fire. The spirit had never heard its own existence acknowledged so calmly. It remained perfectly still. Children imagined monsters. Old people sensed ghosts. Madmen shouted at empty air. But this child knew exactly what stood before him. "You came later than I thought," Elias whispered. The room became colder. The fire bent sideways without wind. Outside, every owl in the forest stopped calling at once. The spirit felt something impossible pressing against its consciousness. Fear. Not fear for itself. Fear of the boy. Elias carefully placed the unfinished wooden carving onto the table. It was not an animal, not a toy, not a person. It was the exact shape of the spirit, every hollow curve, every twisted silhouette, every impossible angle, perfectly carved. "I couldn't remember your face," Elias said softly, "so I carved the one from my dreams." Dreams. The spirit had no reflection, no image, no shadow, nothing a human should ever be able to recreate. Yet the carving was flawless, as though the child had watched it for years. The spirit moved backward. Elias stood. "You shouldn't leave." His voice remained gentle. "If you go now." He looked toward the black forest beyond the frozen window. "They'll find us before sunrise." The spirit turned toward the trees. At first, nothing moved. Then every branch began trembling, not from wind, from footsteps. Hundreds of them. Slow, perfectly synchronized. Crunch, crunch, crunch. The snow echoed with approaching feet. Too many, far too many for a forgotten mountain village. The spirit looked again into the darkness between the pines. Dozens of figures stood motionless beyond the tree line, too distant to see clearly, too still to be alive, watching, waiting. One by one, they lifted their heads. Although no faces could be seen beneath the darkness, the spirit knew with absolute certainty they were staring directly at Elias. Not the village, not the cabin, the boy. And for the first time in countless centuries, the spirit realized something far more terrifying than death itself had entered the world. Something capable of hiding every human destiny. Something that had come searching for the only child whose ending could still be seen. The figures did not move again. They simply stood beyond the trees, perfectly aligned between the trunks, as though the forest itself had grown new shadows overnight. The spirit had witnessed armies waiting before battle. It had watched wolves circle wounded prey. It had seen executioners hesitate before raising the blade. This silence was different. There was no impatience, no hunger, no emotion, only expectation. Elias remained standing beside the table, his eyes fixed on the darkness outside the window. "They never cross until they're invited," he whispered. The spirit turned toward him. It had no voice that humans could truly hear, yet thoughts often reached those who existed close to death. Who are they? The boy closed his eyes. I don't know their name. A pause. I only know mine is the last one they need. The words settled into the cabin like fallen ash. Outside, the snow stopped. Even the wind abandoned the mountain. The silence became so complete that the crackling fireplace sounded impossibly loud. Then, 3 slow knocks echoed against the wooden door. Knock, knock, knock. No footsteps had approached. Nothing had crossed the clearing, yet someone stood outside. Elias did not react. They always do that first. Another 3 knocks, identical, measured, patient. The spirit drifted toward the entrance. It saw through the wood without effort. Nothing, no living body, no ghost, no animal, only darkness, shaped like a person, perfectly absorbing every trace of moonlight. The figure possessed no face, no clothing, no outline sharp enough to remember. Looking directly at it felt like trying to remember a nightmare moments after waking. Then the thing smiled. Not visibly. The spirit simply knew it had smiled. Every instinct older than civilization screamed a warning. Leave, now. Yet something stronger kept it inside the cabin. The boy, the unseen future surrounding him, the impossible absence of every other destiny. Another knock. This time, the cabin itself answered. The wooden walls groaned. Tiny cracks spread across the ceiling. Dust drifted into the fire. They're asking politely, Elias murmured. They won't forever. The spirit searched the boy's future once more. Again it saw the abandoned well, the rain, the pale hand emerging from black water, nothing beyond. The vision had not changed, which meant the path toward that night had already begun. The spirit suddenly understood something terrifying. The future had become hidden for everyone else, because all roads now led through Elias. Every missing destiny depended on the child surviving long enough to reach that well. The realization struck like ice. This was no coincidence. Someone or something had rewritten fate itself. The spirit reached toward the door. Ancient symbols, invisible to human eyes, spread across the wood like silver veins. Centuries ago, forgotten monks had discovered that certain patterns could delay beings that existed between worlds. Delay, never stop. The symbols glowed. The darkness outside retreated exactly 1 step. Nothing more. The figure remained waiting, satisfied, as though 1 step had always been enough. The spirit froze. It had not been testing the barrier. It had been measuring the spirit. Behind the first figure, another appeared, then another. Dozens became hundreds. Hundreds became a sea of silent silhouettes filling the forest. None crossed into the clearing. None needed to. They had already learned what they came to know. The spirit could interfere, which meant they would adapt. Without warning, every figure vanished, not by walking away, by simply no longer existing. The forest returned, empty. The stars emerged again between the branches. The silence broke as distant wolves began howling across the mountains. Elias finally breathed. They've never left this quickly. The spirit studied him carefully. How long have you seen them? The boy answered immediately, as though hearing words that had never been spoken. Since before I could remember my parents. He sat beside the fireplace. When I was little, I thought everyone saw them. His fingers traced circles through the ashes. They stood outside my window every night. I waved. They never waved back. A faint smile crossed his face before fading. When I asked my mother who they were, his voice stopped. The memory clearly hurt. She cried. The spirit searched deeper into the fragments surrounding the boy. Normally, human memories remained hidden, but Elias felt strangely transparent, almost unfinished. Images surfaced. A younger Elias standing beside his mother, drawing faceless people on scraps of paper. His mother's terrified expression. The drawings burning inside the fireplace. A locked cellar beneath the cabin. Whispers after midnight. Then darkness. Something erased the memory before it could continue, not blurred, removed, as though reality itself refused to remember. The spirit recoiled. Only one force possessed that authority. Fate. Someone had wounded fate. Hours passed before dawn. Neither the spirit nor Elias slept. Instead, the boy opened an old wooden chest beneath his bed. Inside rested dozens of carvings. Each one represented something impossible. A staircase climbing into empty sky. A bird with human hands. A tree growing upside down. A door floating without walls. Finally, Elias lifted the oldest carving. It was cracked with age. A stone well. The spirit recognized it instantly. The same well from the vision. "My father made this." The boy brushed dust away. "He told me never to go there. He said," Elias hesitated, "if I ever heard my own voice calling from inside the well, I had to run." The fire suddenly exploded with sparks. Every carving inside the chest rattled at once. The spirit looked outside. Morning had arrived, but no sunlight touched the cabin. Dark clouds covered the mountain with unnatural speed. Someone was approaching, this time alive. A horse emerged through the fog carrying Father Aldrin, the oldest priest in the region. The villagers respected him because he never lied. They feared him because he never laughed. He stopped outside the cabin. His horse refused to move closer. Father Aldrin climbed down slowly, carrying no weapon, only an ancient lantern whose flame burned blue instead of gold. The spirit recognized the light. It had not seen it for nearly 800 years. Soul fire, created only for rituals involving beings beyond death. The old priest looked directly toward the spirit. Not perfectly, not like Elias, but enough. "So," he said quietly, "you're still here." The spirit remained motionless. Father Aldrin entered without asking permission. The moment he crossed the doorway, every carving inside the cabin trembled. The priest ignored them. Instead, he looked at Elias with profound sadness. "I hoped this day would never come." The boy stood. "You know about them." Father Aldrin nodded. "I know enough." He placed the blue lantern onto the table. Its flame suddenly divided into two. One flame pointed toward Elias, the other toward the spirit. "I was afraid this would happen." He sighed. "The guardian finally found the witness." The spirit focused entirely on the old man. Guardian? Witness? Those words belong to ancient laws older than kingdoms, laws spoken only when reality itself faced collapse. Father Aldrin slowly removed a weathered leather journal from beneath his coat. Its pages were almost black with age. On the cover rested a symbol identical to the ones Elias carved without understanding. The priest opened the journal carefully. Every page contained drawings, not of monsters, not of demons, of spirits. Thousands of them. Each image was crossed out in faded ink, except one. The final page. Blank. Father Aldrin looked at the spirit. "You are the last." A cold certainty settled through the cabin. The old priest continued, "There used to be many like you. They remembered every ending. They guided the balance. One by one, they disappeared." The spirit searched centuries of memory. Fragments surfaced, faces it had forgotten. Others like itself, drifting across deserts, oceans, kingdoms, gone. Had they vanished or been erased? Father Aldrin turned another page. Hidden between the final sheets rested a folded letter. The paper looked impossibly old, older than the village, older than the church. Across its surface appeared only one sentence, written in ink that shimmered like liquid silver. When the last spirit can no longer see the death of mankind, the door below will begin to remember its own name. The cabin became silent. No one spoke. Then Elias asked the question none of them wanted answered. "What's the door below?" Father Aldrin did not answer immediately. Instead, he looked toward the distant forest, toward the unseen well hidden somewhere beneath the ancient trees. When he finally spoke, his voice barely rose above a whisper. "It isn't a place. It's something that was never supposed to wake." Father Aldrin's final words lingered in the cabin long after the silence returned. No one moved. The blue flame inside the lantern leaned toward the forest as though pulled by an invisible tide. The spirit watched it carefully. Soul fire never lied. Whatever had awakened was already calling. Outside, the first villagers began their ordinary morning. A woman swept snow from her doorstep. Children laughed while chasing each other through the square. A blacksmith opened his workshop. Everything appeared perfectly normal, but the spirit saw something no living eye could. Thin strands of darkness stretched from every villager's shadow toward the forest. Not chains, roots. Each person remained unaware as the invisible threads slowly tightened. The hidden futures had not vanished. They had been gathered, collected, as if every destiny in the village had become part of a single waiting heart. Father Aldrin noticed the spirit staring. "You see them now?" It was not a question. The spirit answered with a slight movement. The priest lowered his eyes. "Then we have even less time than I feared." He unfolded an old map across the table. The mountains surrounding the village had been drawn with remarkable precision. Yet one section had been scratched away until only damaged parchment remained. At its center, someone had written a warning. "No path remains the same twice." "The well isn't always in the same place," Father Aldrin explained. "It chooses where it wishes to be found." Elias frowned. "That's impossible." The old priest looked at him with quiet sorrow. So was a child who could see the last spirit. The room fell silent once more. Then a scream shattered the village. Not one of pain, one of confusion. They rushed outside. An elderly man stood in the middle of the square, staring at his own reflection in a bucket of water. His face had disappeared. Not physically. His reflection simply showed empty air where he should have been. The bucket slipped from his trembling hands. Water flooded the frozen ground. Every reflection and every puddle throughout the village vanished at the exact same instant. Panic spread immediately. People touched their faces, called each other's names, looked into windows, into polished metal, into ice. Nothing looked back. The spirit understood before anyone else. Reflections belonged to memory. The door below was no longer stealing futures. It had begun stealing identity. Father Aldrin grabbed Elias by the shoulder. "We leave now." The three of them crossed the village before anyone could stop them. No one even noticed the spirit drifting beside the boy. Fear had made every eye blind. The forest swallowed them within minutes. Ancient cedars blocked the gray sky overhead. Snow muffled every footstep. The deeper they walked, the quieter the world became. No birds, no insects, no wind, only breathing. After nearly an hour, Elias stopped. "I know this place." The spirit looked around. Nothing seemed unusual. Then it noticed the trees. Every trunk carried the same carved symbol Elias had drawn since childhood. Thousands of them, some fresh, others so old the bark had nearly grown over them. The marks formed a winding trail deeper into the woods. "My father never told me why he carved these," Elias whispered. "He only said I'd understand some day." Father Aldrin's expression darkened. He wasn't marking the path. He was trying to keep it asleep. They continued. The carvings became more frequent, then more desperate. Some trees bore dozens of overlapping symbols carved so deeply that sap had hardened like tears. Finally, the forest ended. Before them stretched a circular clearing untouched by snow. At its center stood the stone well, exactly as the spirit had seen, old, cracked, covered in black moss despite the freezing cold. Rain began falling without clouds. Silver drops descended from an empty sky. The vision had begun. The spirit felt the future locking into place. Every moment unfolded exactly as it had foreseen. Elias stepped forward. Father Aldrin reached for him. "Don't!" Too late. A familiar voice drifted from inside the well, soft, warm, gentle. "Elias!" The boy froze. His eyes widened. "Mom?" Another voice joined it, his father's. "We've been waiting." Tears filled the child's eyes. "They're alive!" Father Aldrin shouted. "No! They're borrowing memories!" The spirit surged between Elias and the well. For the first time in its existence, it touched the physical world. The air erupted with freezing light. The ground cracked beneath the force. Elias stumbled backward. Then every tree surrounding the clearing bent toward the well at once. The earth shook. A sound unlike anything human ears were meant to hear echoed from below. Not a roar, not a scream, a name spoken by something with no mouth. The stones surrounding the well split apart. Dark water overflowed despite there being no source beneath it. Then a hand emerged, exactly as the spirit had foreseen. Pale, thin, human. It gripped the broken stones. Another hand followed, then another. Not from one body, from dozens, hundreds. They climbed over one another in impossible silence. Faceless figures pulled themselves from the darkness beneath the water. Each possessed the shape of a human, but none possessed an identity. Blank faces, blank skin, blank existence. The stolen reflections, the stolen futures. The door below had been building bodies. Father Aldrin raised the blue lantern. Its flame exploded into brilliant white. The faceless beings recoiled for a single heartbeat. Then the light died. The lantern shattered. The old priest collapsed. Years seemed to leave his body in seconds. His hair whitened completely. His skin became paper thin. The ritual had cost everything. "Elias," he whispered, "listen carefully." The boy knelt beside him. "The dog cannot invent. It only steals. It needs one life that still belongs to fate." His breathing weakened. "That's you." The spirit suddenly understood. Every other destiny had been hidden because the door had stolen them. Only Elias remained beyond its reach. Not because he was chosen, because someone had protected him before he was born. His parents had known every carving, every warning, every sleepless night. They had never been trying to hide the boy. They had been hiding his future. Father Aldrin smiled faintly. "They loved you enough to make fate forget where to look?" With those words, he died. The spirit saw his ending exactly as it happened. The first clear death it had witnessed since entering the village. For an instant, every hidden destiny flickered, then vanished again. The faceless figures continued climbing. Hundreds surrounded the clearing, waiting, watching Elias. The boy stood slowly. His fear remained, but something stronger had taken its place. Understanding. He looked toward the spirit. "You've always watched people die." The spirit remained silent. "Can you die?" It had never asked itself that question. It simply existed, or so it believed. Elias picked up one of his father's old carving knives from his pocket. He held it toward the spirit. "I think I finally know why I could always see you." The spirit looked into the boy's eyes one last time. The vision changed. For the first time, the abandoned future unfolded beyond the pale hand. It saw itself. Standing where Elias now stood, it saw the door reaching for the child. Then it saw itself stepping between them. Everything after that became brilliant white. The future had never ended. It had been waiting for a choice. The spirit understood. It had mistaken certainty for destiny. But certainty had never removed freedom. It had only revealed where freedom mattered most. Without hesitation, the spirit moved, not away from the door, into it. The faceless being screamed, not aloud, inside reality itself. Every stolen future burst from their empty bodies like countless streams of light. The forest shook. The well collapsed inward. The darkness fought to hold its shape. But the spirit carried something older than fear. It carried every ending it had ever witnessed, every farewell, every sacrifice, every final heartbeat. It released them all. The door below could steal futures. It could steal names. It could steal memories. But it could not steal what people had already given each other: love, forgiveness, courage. Those final moments became an endless tide the darkness could not contain. The well shattered. The faceless bodies dissolved into drifting ash. The roots binding the village snapped. Across the mountains every stolen reflection returned at once. The silence ended. Wind rushed through the trees. Birds cried overhead. Sunlight finally pierced the clouds. Elias stood alone in the clearing. The spirit was gone. Only one object remained, the small wooden carving the boy had made beside the fireplace. Except now, its face was blank, as though no one in the world could remember what the last spirit had looked like. Years later, Elias became the keeper of the forgotten forest. Travelers sometimes asked why an ancient circle of cedar trees surrounded nothing but broken stones. He always smiled gently. "Some doors stay closed," he would answer, "but only because someone remembers why they must never be opened." And whenever rain fell beneath a cloudless sky, he would quietly place a new wooden carving beside the ruins of the old well, not because he feared the darkness would return, but because somewhere beyond memory, a silent guardian deserved not to be forgotten. Some destinies seem inevitable, and some endings cannot be avoided. Yet the greatest moments in life are not defined by how they end, but by the choices made before the final page is written. Fear can steal our future. Despair can make us forget who we are. But compassion, sacrifice, and love leave marks that no darkness can erase. The spirit spent centuries believing fate was unchangeable. In the end, it discovered that the future is not shaped by certainty. It is shaped by courage. Sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones whose names are forgotten because the world they saved is able to keep living. If this story captured your imagination, there's much more to come. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Until next time, take care and keep wondering